Hey, Supervisor. How's it going? How are you doing? What's been up this week? Have there been any themes? I've had a theme this week that really just in the last couple days that I was thinking about, and I thought I would bring here and share a little bit about and see if people have ideas, thoughts, perspectives. And what it was about was, well, let's see. Let me start. I had a supervisee yesterday who is quite experienced, more than halfway through her hours, and she's wonderful. I mean, all of my supervisees are wonderful, but she's a really wonderful clinician, very thoughtful, has a good clinical sense, and very careful. Is careful the right word? Intentional about the words that she uses and how she speaks. And that's how I experience her in supervision. So I would make the assumption that she's the same with her clients as well. So what came up yesterday in supervision was she was sharing about a client who had experienced a pretty traumatic event. And my supervisee checked in with me and said, let me check in with you. Are you okay with hearing this? Because this is really hard content. This is really difficult. And I just want to check in, are you okay? So she was checking in with me, right? Which I thought, I had a lot of thoughts about that. One was oh, she doesn't have to check in with me. I'm her supervisor. I'm supposed to be able to handle anything that she brings, right? And the assumption here is that I have a lot of experience with hearing difficult things, and so I should be able to hear anything. And then the other part of that was I really appreciate that she has the thought process around discussing traumatic events and wants to check in. To me, that is someone who is really steeped in a trauma-informed way of practicing, right? That she's wait, let me check first, and let me know if this feels like too much. And then I had a supervisee today who very similar situation in that she's got less experience, less clinical experience. And she had this really amazing moment with a client in which a client shared some very, difficult trauma that they had experienced. That was something we were aware of, but weren't really expecting the client to talk about because they had said they didn't want to talk about it. However, clearly the relationship between my supervisee and her client had developed to a place where the client felt safe to be able to talk about it. And so my supervisee was processing with me how moving that was for her to be trusted with this really difficult experience that her client was sharing. And so we were processing that. That's just, when you have those moments in therapy as a therapist, particularly as a new therapist, it's it's a pretty profound moment. It means something about the work you've put in to really build rapport and to build trust and a strong relationship with your client. You've built this kind of safe container for them to be able to express whatever they need to express. And so we were kind of in that. And what she said was, she said she had gone the day before to her group supervision. And in group supervision, it was right after, really soon after she had this pretty heavy session with her client. And so of course she wanted to process it in there. And what she noticed was that the other people in group, the other clinicians in the group, were having a reaction to the content she was sharing about what her client had shared with her. And then the group supervisor was stop, just stop. Because the group supervisor was tracking what was going on for everybody and was okay, we need to pause, and everybody needs to just ground, take some breaths. Let's check in. How are we doing, right? And so she stopped my supervisee. And and so my supervisee was having a reaction like, oh no, like, did I overstep? Did I say too much? Was that not appropriate? I didn't even think about how that would affect them, right? Like, she might have had an assumption that that we all deal with difficult content with our clients, and we all hear traumatic, difficult stuff all the time, which a lot of us do. I would say most of us do. It's pretty hard to avoid, like, that's why people are coming to therapy. They're coming to process stuff that they need help processing. So I really don't fault her for having that assumption. She hadn't run into this situation before where she's sharing content from a session, and she's like really seeing how it's negatively impacting, emotionally impacting her colleagues. And then she was feeling bad. And so I was really glad that she had brought that to supervision, because I'm like, well, let's talk about that here, because I don't want you to be too hard on yourself. Like, you couldn't have known, and now you do. This is a great learning opportunity to kind of note and to spend some time examining, what comes up for us when we are exposed to trauma material. And of course, you are going to need to take that to group supervision and to individual supervision. Let's talk about how you take it there, because it may not be that the content of what happened needs to be discussed in great detail. There's a way that you actually can kind of protect the people in the room by not going into great detail, and instead maybe focusing on, or maybe saying something along the lines of like, my client shared this really traumatic experience in which this, a sort of a general, like, this thing happened, like somebody died. So let's say it's that. And what it brought up in me in that session was da 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 da, fill in the blank. I was really moved. I felt I had, like, tears were coming to my eyes. I was really trying to just lean in and be really present with what my client was saying. I was feeling waves of emotion. I was feeling overwhelmed. I was feeling like it was hard to track, whatever, a million different things that the therapist can be experiencing when they are listening to somebody share trauma experiences. And that maybe that is what needs to get brought to the group, rather than the content itself. However, there are situations, right, where the content, the details of what happened is salient and is very important and specific to what the therapist is needing to consult about. And I think in those cases, and I'd be curious about what you all think, but I think in those cases there is a way to be conscientious about that, in the way that my other supervisee was, which is, let me check in. This is difficult content. Are people open to hearing this? It may be triggering. It entails whatever. It entails death. It entails child abuse. It entails, give them a sense of what they might be hearing, so that they can opt out if they need to. Because so what do you guys think about this? I have experienced this in my own consultation groups, and with therapists who have a much more experience than I do, and I've watched them navigate consultation so that they can get the support they need in coping with and processing and getting a question answered in a situation where there's really, really difficult content, and I think that it's we just have to do it in a very intentional, conscientious way. And trauma informed, to me, trauma informed means that people get to have control over this experience as much as possible. So if they need to opt out to take care of themselves, we want to give them the choice. We don't want to blindside them with something that they can't unhear once they have heard it. And I think there is this, I was going to say like a myth, but maybe there's this story that us therapists tell ourselves, which is that, and I know I've experienced this myself, so maybe it's just me, this sense of like, I need to be able to handle everything. I should be able to hear anything and everything and be able to handle it, meaning be able to emotionally metabolize anything that I hear. And while that is a noble intention, it's just not always true, because we are humans, as therapists are humans, right? And it depends on what's going on in our own lives and how well we take care of ourselves. That all contributes to how much capacity we have at any given time to be present for our clients and to be able to really take in and metabolize what they are sharing with us. So I wonder what you all think of it. I mean, I'm sure there are supervisors out there, therapists out there that have, years more experience than I do, and you may have a way of thinking about this that has helped you over the years with coping with hearing difficult information. And I'm also curious from the supervisory perspective, if you would have given different advice, if you would have responded differently to as than I did with my supervisees. I think of all of this as just this kind of ongoing process that we're all in. And I may have a perspective about something today, but I can be swayed. My mind can change. I tend to be a little bit of a slower processor, and so as things kind of sink in and I take time to think about them and process them, sometimes I come to a different realization or thought about it than I initially did. But I think that, ultimately my goal and how I was responding to my supervisee today was like, I really want to reduce shame. I don't think, her feeling shame or feeling bad about herself is not going to be helpful. It's actually just she's just got new information about like, oh, this is a possibility. If I share this kind of information in group supervision, this might be the response I get. And is that, that's not what I'm looking for. I'm actually looking for something else. I'm looking for support, or I'm looking to have a question answered, or I'm looking for validation. I'm looking for someone to maybe share the burden of how heavy this was to hold. And so there's something in that, like processing that to get that kind of clarity of like, what do I really need here? I think is the learning. I think that's the learning. So anyway, that's my little bit of an offering today, as something to think about. And as always, I welcome your comments and your thoughts, and I welcome questions, and I welcome, other topics that you might want to hear about. And I will see you next time. Okay, take it easy.